I mean, 47. I think Wallace is the 47th Conservative MP to announce that they're not going to stand at the next general election. I mean, he is in his early 50s. Some of the people who are standing down are in their 30s, at which point you would normally be, looking forward to promotion and getting on in life. And instead, it looks like a lot of rats leaving the sinking ship.
Start this hour then with that Sunday Times front page interview. Ben Wallace has served as Defence Secretary under 3 Prime Ministers and has played a high-profile role in the UK's response to the Ukraine war. But now he's announced he's quitting frontline politics. He's been speaking exclusively to the Sunday Times chief political commentator Tim Shipman.
I think he's basically just had enough. He's been in politics since 1999 when he became a member of the Scottish Parliament. He's been, I think, the longest continuous serving frontbencher, along with Michael Gove, in this government. He's the longest serving Tory Defence Minister since Winston Churchill, and he's decided to go and get himself a life. There's some interesting personal material in this interview I've done with him where he talks about, his regrets at the fact that he put his job before his family, and I suspect that's part of his motivation. But I think he's sort of proud of what he's done. He was the one who, with Boris Johnson's support, persuaded Whitehall that they needed to get stuck in and support the Ukrainian government and provide them with lethal aid. He's presided over a lot of big issues as Security Minister and Defence Secretary, and I think, he feels like he's done his time. And because his seat's being abolished at the general election, he's seeking a new life, and he's sort of decided that as a result of that, he should give the Prime Minister time to install somebody else and give them a run up to the general election.
Was he burnt at all by the experience, or soured, I suppose might be a better word, by the experience of going up to be the next head of NATO?
Well, I think, look, that was an obvious next step for him. And, I think he watched carefully to see whether Rishi Sunak backed him up. And the Prime Minister did. He put quite a bit of effort in behind the scenes to trying to get that job for Wallace. And he, I think most independent observers would say he was clearly the best qualified person to do it. But for whatever reason, the politicking inside NATO means that some people wanted a woman, some people wanted a head of state, and the Americans at the end of the day didn't support him. And I think Wallace and Downing Street are probably both disappointed with that.
I mean, I suppose some people might interpret the decision, or even he might have worried about this at one point, that he's sort of deserting Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party when they need him most as one of the most popular sort of frontline members of it. He was, often predicted to be the next Prime Minister. He polls brilliantly amongst the Tory membership. He's always been very popular. Was he concerned about how it might look?
Yes, well, that's where this gets a bit interesting. I mean, Ben Wallace is still top of the list of ministers as polled by the Tory grassroots on the Conservative Home website, where the Prime Minister himself is now in negative figures. The story here is that Ben Wallace told Rishi Sunak he was planning to stand down on the 16th of June, which is 4 weeks ago. He also said, look, I don't want to get in the way of these by-elections, which could be a problem. I don't want to make it look like I'm disappearing, around a difficult time. And I don't want it to look like I'm disappearing sort of immediately afterwards, because people might read something into that. So my plan would be to announce that I'm going to go in August. He told me about this several weeks ago. I went out on the road with him to do a sort of exit interview, and it was all slated to go in the newspaper in sort of 3 weeks' time. But what's happened instead is that someone in government has taken it upon themselves this weekend to brief our sister paper, The Times, that, Wallace might be the sort of person who might make way for younger people in the reshuffle. And frankly, to try and make it look as if Downing Street were the ones who'd come up with this idea, it was Ben Wallace's idea. I'm told the Prime Minister was surprised when he said he was going to stand down from the Cabinet. But someone who has been a bit too clever by half, and Wallace has now felt that his hand has been forced, and between himself and the newspaper, we decided we'd put the story out this weekend. And as a result, whoever it was that was briefing against him has meant that this drops, a few days before what are expected to be catastrophic by-election results for the Conservative Party.
Yeah, and whether you like it or not, it looks like here is a major figure leaving frontline politics, leaving Rishi Sunak in the lurch when perhaps Sunak could do with his support. It doesn't look great, does it?
No, I mean, 47, I think Wallace is the 47th Conservative MP to announce that they're not going to stand at the next general election. I mean, he is in his early 50s. Some of the people who are standing down are in their 30s, at which point you would normally be, looking forward to promotion and getting on in life. And instead, it looks like a lot of rats leaving the sinking ship.
How did he come across to you, Tim, when you were talking to him about it? Was he regretful, downbeat, relieved, when we're talking about the kind of emotional picture that he was putting across?
I think he's kind of quite sanguine about it. I think he's sort of made what for him is a big life decision. And as I say, I think he's proud of what he's done. I think he sort of feels that he's done what he can now. He put in place, a major uptick in defence spending and got, at a very difficult time for the economy, that to be seen as sort of core public spending again, rather than just the focus on sort of schools and hospitals and all the money that went into the pandemic. So I think, he feels in a sense like his work here is done. And there was a sort of lightness of spirit about him. When you ask him what he's going to do next, the natural thing for someone in his position would be to go off and, join the board of a couple of defence companies and make a huge amount of money. And it may be in due course that that's what he does, but he was sort of saying, I might go and run a bar. I feel quite relaxed about my life. He's obviously been working 24/7 for, pretty much 7 years from the time he took on the job of security minister. He said, I've had 3 different mobile phones on my bedside table for 7 years. He wouldn't tell me exactly what all 3 of them were for. But
secret, he said, didn't he?
That's right. But I think he's even thinking about, well, what do I like in life? I'm quite into Formula One. I'm into horse racing. Maybe I'll go and find a job in one of those areas. And he's young enough to sort of start again. And he's an experienced guy at running things. So, I wonder if anybody in those sports might find it quite interesting to have someone like Ben Wallace
perhaps
along.
there's a call out there. I mean, I think when I get incredibly stressed and it feels like too much. Not sure if you're like this, Tim. I often joke about going to work on the checkouts at a supermarket just for the simplicity of it. Maybe he's at that stage.
I've always wanted to drive a cab. I think that's what satisfies me.
You'd have really good chat as a black cab driver, actually, Tim.
You get good chat and you listen to the news and, and you can impart your own views that the bloke in the back doesn't necessarily have to be listening to you for you to impart them. So, I can imagine that's a world in which I might be quite content.
Let's finish up on who is favourite to replace Ben Wallace as Defence Secretary and what else you're hearing about the reshuffle due in September. And this is when, of course, Wallace will step down.
Well, look, the name of John Glenn does the rounds as someone who is a Sunak trustee and may be promoted. He is the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He served in the Treasury when Sunak was Chancellor. So he's the guy at the moment in charge of reining in spending in government departments. He happens to be the MP for Salisbury, which is obviously where Salisbury Plain is, big sort of army centre. So I think there's regarded as some kind of potential synergy there. Penny Mordaunt has been Defence Secretary before for a very brief period before Wallace took over. James Heappey, who's the Armed Forces Minister, I suspect would be Wallace's choice. I mean, he thinks it needs to be someone who understands what's been going on and understands the tricks of the Treasury and, how governments can get badly out of sync on defence. So I think he thinks it would be a good idea if it was someone who had experience in the department.
That was Tim Shipman, the Sunday Times' chief political commentator, with that exclusive scoop on the departure of Ben Wallace. First of all, as Defence Secretary. That'll happen around September in the next reshuffle. And then he's going to step down as an MP before the next general election. So great story there. Tim Shipman, chief political commentator of the Sunday Times.